Welcome to the Cannacurio podcast powered by Cannabiz Media. I'm your host, Ed Keating, and on today's show, we're joined by Liesl Bernard, CEO of CannabizTeam.
Thank you so
Welcome,
much.
Liesl.
Thank you.
We both share a similar name with cannabis in our name, and we felt it was high time to get the two of us together to learn a little bit more about what you all do. So I'd like to start with your background and why did you found CannabizTeam?
Gosh, it's a long story, and it seems like a long time ago now, but it's only about 7 years ago that this all happened. I started my career as a CPA, actually working for KPMG, and after spending some time in public accounting, I went to Robert Half, which is a big global staffing firm, and said, "Hey, I want another job in accounting." And they said, "Sure, we can help you with that, but by the way, there's very few CPAs that really have a personality, etc. Why don't you consider doing recruiting?" And I really didn't enjoy accounting, and that sounded a lot more fun. At ripe age of 26 or something like that, I jumped over and became a recruiter, working very much in the accounting and finance space, recruiting CFOs, et cetera. And then my scope sort of broadened after that, but I just loved it. So I ended up spending 20 years with Robert Half in various different roles and helped start their operation in Australia, worked in Europe a bit, and then managed all their operations in Hawaii for 9 years prior to coming back to California. And when I came back to California, they asked me to run executive search on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. This was around 2015, 2016. And a cannabis company approached me and asked me to do a big CFO and CEO search for them. And went to Robert Half, was super excited about the opportunity to work with this company. And they said, "No, you can't work in cannabis because we're a federally, we're a publicly traded company, and cannabis, does not fall into the scope of the businesses that we work with." So I immediately saw the business opportunity there. I always had an entrepreneurial sort of flair, wanted to have, do something entrepreneurial. And I said, this is my time. So I ended up leaving, selling everything I had to start this business. And here we are 7 years later.
Wow. That's a great story. Now, in terms of the marketplace, we started our company around the same time, about 2015, and started hiring people more in 2016. Back then, it used to be, quote unquote, the green rush, just putting out, hey, we have jobs in cannabis and be a researcher. We got overwhelmed with people wanting to come in. How has that changed? Because the industry has matured and it's a tougher industry now. Is it still a green rush, or people still just wanting to get in because it's cannabis, or is it a more nuanced entrance for people, wanting to join our industry?
I think there's still a lot of excitement about the cannabis industry. I remember, 2015, 16, we almost had to beg people to take a chance to come work in cannabis and, assure them that they're not going to get arrested and go to jail or lose their certification, their license, their CPA license, et cetera. And, over the last few years, it's become the sexy industry. We get so many people calling saying we want to work in cannabis. And I think what makes cannabis different is that people come to this industry with heart, right? A lot of people have a story related to a family member or themselves or something that cannabis really helped heal someone in some shape or form. And so I think a lot of people love this industry for that reason. But I also still think that this industry, even though it's going through a little bit of ups and downs right now, there's still a ton of opportunity. And I think people see it as an opportunity to have a career change and to really make a difference in a field that they're very passionate about. So still a lot of excitement about the industry.
Yeah, I agree with your point about passion and heart, because a lot of people, we see it in just the cover letters that they send in. They often tell that story, of a relative, family friend or something like that. And that does make the industry more important to them than just, quote unquote, a job.
Exactly. Now,
one of the other things that our two companies share is we both rely on data. And I was intrigued to learn that you've been publishing your cannabis industry salary guide for a while now. And, how many years has it been coming out? And maybe
this year.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. We just finished our 5th year for one of our reports, and when you have that many versions of a report, it really starts to have a presence in the industry. We find that people are waiting, like, when's the next one coming out? And I imagine you probably run into that as well.
Yeah, yeah, we are, and I think a lot of people use it because the industry is still quite fragmented. A lot of companies use our salary guide to sort of see if they're within the range to attract the right talent, and often people use our salary guide too to negotiate their salaries when they are in cannabis and maybe switching from one company to another. So I hope that it's useful for the industry. That's the reason we put it out, is to have some sort of resource to go to for that type of information.
Yeah, well, benchmarks are always great, and I was hoping you could tell us, a little bit more about, some of the insights that you've gained. Like, how many new cannabis jobs are you predicting to happen over the coming year?
I think the outlook is for the next 3 years that at least another 200,000 jobs are being created in the industry. And that's, mainly on the states that are just going legal now: Maryland, Missouri, Minnesota, and, the tri-state area is predicted to alone, generate close to 100,000 jobs as well. So that's really exciting, that there's still so much growth. I know the rest of the industry is going, experiencing a few ups and downs, but just think about the newer states that are legalizing or going adult use. All of those states are still hiring in all the verticals.
Now, are you seeing anything in terms of states where it might be shrinking or exits? Like, we know in Oklahoma, there's a license moratorium, and although it went into effect the end of last August, it's really in this last quarter that just finally happened. We track new licenses in the state, and the number of new stores went from 300 licenses issued in January to 1 in June. So
Wow.
I imagine there's some shrinkage there. Is that something that you think you'll be reporting on in coming years, in terms of where the industry might not grow, or maybe you already covered that now?
I think the data will probably show, as we put the data together for our next salary guide, that there's definitely going to be a little bit of an attrition in the market, but I don't think it's significant. We're still, because there's so many jobs are still being created in the newer states. I think from a job perspective, there's not going to be that much. My guess, and nobody's really tracking this information because cannabis jobs are not being tracked by the Department of Labor. So I think it's roughly around 10%, but that's a correction that needs to happen, I think, in the market as well. I think some states issued way too many licenses, right?
Yes. Yeah, and we certainly see that. And the supply and demand issues, create these races to the bottom, and then the established incumbents say, please, no more licenses, stop. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So it definitely puts some,
Right.
yeah, but definitely put some strain on the system. Now, in terms of, with all that background, how has the hiring mix evolved? I think in my reviewing of your report, you talked about direct hire, on-demand temp, executive search, outplacement. How has that changed over time? Because you were early into the space on the recruiting side, and you've been in it now for a while. So how does that mix evolve?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved, and especially in the last year when there was a little bit of economic uncertainty. I think a lot of clients are looking to more of a mixed staffing model, or a hybrid staffing model where they use hourly workers, maybe consultants or project workers. And then fractional executives is sort of a new thing that we're seeing emerging in the market, where companies use executives on a fractional basis, meaning they get this executive in 1 or 2 days a week consistently, or indefinitely, but they don't have the expense of carrying an executive on a full-time salary. So that fractional executive might work for 2 or 3 other companies on a fractional or a part-time basis. And so that's one way of staffing, still getting the expertise that you need, but don't need to carry a $200,000 or $300,000 salary on your books, but you have access to that kind of expertise. So that's something we're seeing evolving. And then obviously direct hire and executive search is still happening. Companies still need full-time employees in order to run the ship, so to speak. But hybrid staffing, flexible staffing, I think, is the new way to go, and it's very much more economical, right? Because you don't have to carry that full salary or payroll load, and you can scale up or down as your needs change as a company as well.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that my sense of what you said is, rent if you don't need to buy. And this way you can really manage your balance sheet or income statement way better. And, given the challenges the industry faces, I guess that's just a very logical approach to managing the labor part of your business.
Yeah, pay for what you need instead of carrying the overhead full time. So yeah, and that's really exciting. So we're really seeing our hourly or temp business grow, especially now during the downturn. And there's many more companies that are looking for fractional executives, and have a marketing person just part time but consistently for a long period of time, or a CFO or that type of executive that you don't necessarily need someone 40 hours a week.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, general direction of salaries, are they staying flat? Are they going up? Or, is it depending on the sector that the people are working on, and in terms of whether they're moving up or down?
I think companies are becoming a little bit more conservative, especially, I think as everyone's trying to conserve cash in the cannabis industry. I think access to capital is just very, very difficult right now. And so everyone's looking at where they can save a bit of money. So I think we're actually seeing a bit of a correction on salaries as well, or maybe even, at least steady. But companies are really, not just throwing money at people anymore like they did 2 or 3 years ago in order to attract the right talent. And I think the market is correcting in that sense. But, we're still seeing big salaries. We're still placing people, in the few hundreds, as far as salaries are concerned. So companies are still willing to pay for great talent, but probably just a little bit more conservative in general.
And one thought that just occurred to me, Liesl, is there a sector differentiation? Because, the cannabis space is sometimes referred to by the plants or the chemicals in it. So we have cannabis, CBD, hemp, which is derived from or the CBD is derived from hemp. Like, do those groups move together, apart? Do you get many hires in the hemp space?
We've had a few more over the last couple of years, but I mean, I think that part of the industry is still relatively small compared to pure cannabis companies, and that's sort of where we're focusing a lot of our staffing for. So I don't think it's as big, as the cannabis industry, and they have access to other resources, right? So they typically use other recruiting firms, or maybe even other banking, et cetera. So it's not as quite as limiting, I think, as the cannabis industry is right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, going down a level into the different activities that businesses get licensed for, we see cultivation, manufacturing, retailer dispensing, sort of the big three. Are any of those areas more in demand? Like, is there a lot of interest in, chief cultivation officers or people who are retail wizards? Like, where's the big interest among, those three, or how does it differ among them?
It almost varies state by state, and depending on where a state is on the life cycle of, getting set up, so to speak. So some of the newer states like Maryland right now, we're seeing a huge demand for cultivators, and in return also manufacturing and retail. So that state is just getting set up to respond to the adult use demand that they just got. So and if you think about it, every state still has to operate independently. So they have to cultivate, extract, manufacture, and retail products from within that state. Products can still not be taken across borders. So there's sort of a less economies of scale still.
Right.
And so we're still seeing a really steady demand, probably less so for non-revenue producing positions, like companies are cutting maybe marketing and some sales roles, et cetera. So where there's, they want to get product on the shelf, but all the fluffy roles are sort of going away, as companies are cutting back a little bit and adjusting to the market.
Yeah, it makes me think back to 2019 as we're heading into the fall. I was going to a couple of conferences and starting to hear a lot about, operational excellence and managing to profitability. And then COVID hit, and then, it didn't matter. Government money, people are buying lots of cannabis, and you sort of got this false hope that the industry was in a different place, and now it has settled back with a vengeance, and it's way more about being profitable and, as you said, managing the cash flow. So
just another change that the cannabis industry have to deal with, right?
Right, exactly. If only they can make 280 go away.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen any other changes during the cannabis bear market? I know when I've gone to conferences over the last 6 months, people joke about their main job is not selling their product or software; it's collections. Like, what trends have you seen in terms of what's going on in the market that maybe you didn't see a year ago?
Yeah, definitely. Cash is very tight for a lot of companies right now, and I think everyone is trying to manage their cash flow. God, let's hope safe banking passes and we see some changes so cannabis companies have easier access to working capital, right? I think it's tight for everyone right now. So definitely collections is a little bit harder, and I think you have to shout a little bit louder in order to get paid these days. So yeah, but that's the ebb and flow of every market and every industry. So we just have to get through this tough time, and hopefully we see change in the industry so that that cash flow is not such a huge issue anymore, and we don't have to pay as much tax. 280.
Exactly.
Changes.
Now, one of the questions I always like to ask in the podcast is trying to get an understanding of how people define their markets. And, some folks have geographical accounts and somebody has the Northeast, somebody has the Midwest. Others do named accounts where, the MSOs are split up. I was curious in a business like yours, which I imagine requires a lot of relationship building. How do you manage your sales team and marketing team? And how do you approach the market here in the US and beyond?
Yeah. Well, we have two, very distinct business lines. One is our temporary services. So we work with a lot of the MSOs and provide people on, in cultivation, trimmers and post-harvest technicians, et cetera, on a large scale, on an hourly basis. And then manufacturing, that's a big area for us as well. So, we work with a lot of the MSOs on the manufacturing side, packaging, et cetera, high volume people at that level. And then our executive search team do contingency placements, contingency fee placements, as well as executive placements and retained search. So they have a very different focus. And we actually are really, starting to see more work internationally as well. I recently met with some clients in Thailand, and we've got some placements that are happening in Thailand. One, taking people from the U.S. and taking them to Thailand, where they can help those companies ramp up fast. And as legalization evolves in Thailand, they're bringing expertise over there. We're working in Puerto Rico. We've placed some people in Switzerland. So the world is opening up, and very often looking to the U.S. for talent. So that's really exciting that we're starting to do more international work. But we work the whole U.S. We place talent in all states, both on an hourly basis for temporary workers and then direct hire placement. And we're fortunate enough that, a lot of the MSOs work with us, and, they're in so many states. So we have the ability to help them in all of those states.
That's great. That's great. Well, now I have to ask the self-serving question. So how does a team like yours utilize cannabis media to help you in those go-to-market efforts?
We love you guys, and we love your database. I think we were one of your first clients back in 2017, maybe. I can't remember when we first signed up. So it's been extremely helpful for us to be able to look at who got licenses and what states, et cetera. But also, I think the information that you guys are continually adding to your database is really helpful. I think you're mentioning last time we spoke that you're also now adding sort of accounting information about companies as well, their financial status, et cetera. So, and especially in a market like this, I feel like that information is so helpful. And I really think it's a real asset to the whole industry to have your database. So thank you for all the work that you guys have done to put that together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I want to go back to that international point a bit. I'm wondering, in general, would you say that firms like yours are a leading indicator of where the industry is going? Just because, we have leading and lagging. Like, we always joke that if a state says, oh, we're going to enact a program, we sit back and wait for 18 months for the licenses to pop out. We're a lagging indicator. But if you're having to go and find people to work in Switzerland and Thailand and elsewhere, that's probably one of the earliest things that people do, right? Like, we need talent to help us figure this out. So maybe I'm answering my question, but are you a leading indicator in where an industry is going?
I think so. I think so. Obviously, no company can exist or no industry can exist without people. So if we're starting to see people being sort of redistributed into different parts of the world, that's probably an indicator, right? That
Yeah.
the market is starting to evolve there. So that, it just gets me so excited because, to be able to, help companies internationally find the right talent has been a big dream of mine. And I feel like I'm a global citizen. I've lived in 4 different countries, and to me, the opportunity to work globally is very exciting. But also for the plant to be accessible, worldwide, and people have access to cannabis. To me, it's such a gift to the world. So I'm really excited to see that evolving.
Well, I would say the industry is lucky to have you in the fact that you already have that international focus. So you know what that looks like. It's not your first rodeo, if you will, in terms of seeing how industries cross borders. I remember when I worked in the software publishing compliance industry, there was a well-revered speaker who talked about companies don't go international, so to speak. He said they have competencies that allow them to work across borders and move people and processes and other things. That's how they're successful. And it always stuck with me that there are certain skill sets you need to have. And, obviously, your company has it through you. And the fact that we're seeing growth internationally is probably a good sign. And that sort of leads to my next question as we get toward the end is, has the industry hit bottom yet? I mean, do you think we're gonna, start going back up the other side, or are we in a really long valley? We have no idea how long it is.
I think if we are, staffing is an indicator of sort of where the industry is and where the economy is. I think we have, because we're seeing a huge, or not a huge, but a very, steady uptake in hiring over the last month or so, and that's not something we saw the previous 3 months. So just this month alone, our temp services, almost doubled again. That on a direct hire basis, we've got many more jobs open. Obviously the newer states that are expanding, a lot of them are in those states, but that's exciting that, even nationally, we're seeing a little bit of an uptake in hiring. So I'm hoping that we've hit rock bottom and it's going back up. But and I'm really excited, just go back to your point on international. I would love to see the MSOs starting, get to that place where they have enough cash. And because I think that a lot of them have dreams of going international and going into Europe and other places in the world. And, that'll be really exciting when these companies are in a better position financially and maybe have some of the limitations of 280E and, access to better capital.
Right.
And then they can expand. So I'm really hopeful that that'll happen soon, and I'd love to be part of that. So.
Well, and I think they've probably learned from the last time they tried that, when it seemed to me that it was a bit more of a land grab, or, hey, we're going to make a bunch of oil and we'll ship it overseas and that'll be international. And I don't think that really necessarily thought through what that whole process was going to be like, and what is it like to enter another country, and all those kind of issues. So I think everybody's eyes are more wide open than they were back in 18, 19, 20, when I think there was more froth and less substance. But that's just from where I sit. So
and I think it's going to make companies smarter to have gone through this little bit of a dip over the last few months.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. It's going to be better run organizations going forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, as my wrap up question, are there any trends that we should be monitoring, or things happening, or new things that CannabizTeam's working on that we're going to hear about over the coming months?
I just want to say that it's not all doom and gloom out there. I know it's very tough on the industry right now, but we're seeing a lot of growth still, and I think there's a ton of opportunity internationally. So let's get through these next few months. And I think from a staffing perspective, I think the flexible staffing is here to stay. And I think companies are going to understand that how valuable that is to be able to scale up and down and to have fractional executives work, especially in the smaller to medium-sized companies. That's such a much more economical way to staff than to hire a whole team of executives on a full-time basis. So I really think that trend that's coming out of this economic correction is going to be here to stay as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, to me, it ties back a little bit to the 280E, where all these companies are having to pay essentially inflated costs. So if there are ways to trim it out to get sort of the just in time or just what I need, it's a reaction to the compliance challenge they face financially. And I'm sure you can give them good advice, being that you started as an accounting person with a personality. You get to see it from a lot of different angles. So Liesl, thanks so much for joining us today.
It was great. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm your host, Ed Keating, and stay tuned for more updates from the Data Vault.